Welcome to Behind the Badge with your special guest, Lieutenant Williams, your news source for all things police in the city of Fond du Lac.
Welcome back into Fond du Lac today on News Talk 1450 KFIZ. It's Friday morning, and you know what time it is, as Lieutenant Williams is back in the studio, and it's now time for Behind the Badge. Good morning, Lieutenant. How's it going?
Good morning. It's busy as always. I just broke your microphone.
It's easy fix. Easy fix.
Super busy. Hiring a lot of people. Hiring CSOs. We have to deal with the snow and stuff like that. That's keeping the department busy. But we're always moving and shaking, and a lot of good things happening. Hopefully, I'll be bringing on a new officer in the near future that we can meet, and maybe a couple of new CSOs.
Awesome. Sounds tremendous. It's always great to meet some of the new people that are going to be driving around the town and, helping you out some way or another.
Yeah, definitely. And, I hope that if anything else that they can at least put a face to a name or something like that, because that's what we're here for. We want to be someone that, you can trust and that you can build a relationship with, and maybe they'll say, hey, I heard you on the radio the other day.
And that's always the best. All right, Lieutenant Williams. What are we thinking this morning? I know we got a topic every single week. What is today's topic?
So it's kind of weird, and then it's not an anniversary or anything, but one of the biggest things that happened in law enforcement was obviously the George Floyd incident that happened in Minnesota, and I thought I'd talk about it a little bit. When this did occur, I was a school resource officer, so I didn't really have a chance to give my take publicly, and I think my take is also our department's take on that situation, and I know there's a lot of questions. Mm-hmm. So I know there's a lot of questions because it was kind of neat experiencing it so I was a school resource officer, and doing that I had a lot of relationships with teachers and stuff. They had questions, and they felt comfortable enough as me being their law enforcement contact of asking me some of those questions. And I got one particular email message about some of those questions, and I was going to kind of share that with you. Because if this person had those questions, someone else probably did too.
Yeah.
And so I want to go in this. And the first question that they asked is, what is our department's take on the incident in Minneapolis? And I think it goes without saying across the board, as far as law enforcement, that no one is really trying to justify that officer's actions. Right. It's something that we have been working on in law enforcement for a long time, is how to monitor subjects, how to deal with people that might be having some sort of episodes. There is a thing called excited delirium. And basically, how you describe excited delirium is if someone is actively fighting with you, and maybe they have something going on upstairs that's just not right, but they're fighting, they have super strength, and it's a really hard situation. And what happens is it's like the law where every action is an equal opposite reaction. So they fight, their body goes, and then at some point it just goes out. And that's something that law enforcement has been training for years and years on, as far as dealing with excited delirium. Now, that's not quite what the case was here, but it was probably due to somewhat of that officer just kneeling on the neck and not really being receptive to, is this force necessary, continually to monitor it. And honestly, if maybe during that kind of fight to get him in handcuffs, if that knee went up on the neck for a couple seconds, that could have been justified, because, use of force is not pretty. I think we talked about that on the show.
Yeah,
there's no good use of force. But I believe it was 8 minutes. If anyone was monitoring that subject for that long, they would know that would not be the appropriate amount of time to use that sort of force. And I just wanted to say that Fond du Lac Police Department, we ban chokeholds. Now across the state, they have officially banned them. But back when this happened in 2020, we didn't use them anyway. The only way we could use a chokehold is if our life was dependent on it. So if someone was attacking us and it's the do or die situation, then we would be able to use a chokehold in that situation.
Definitely all makes sense right there. And again, we've all seen the video, and this is an incident that happened a while ago. So just kind of going back, kind of not necessarily reliving it, but kind of looking at it from the use of force point of view.
Yeah, and it's kind of weird too, because we also have this desirability thing. So sometimes we could be totally legally in the right, but then there's this desirability factor, and taking someone's life for what ended up being a counterfeit bill, obviously we would not want to do that. That's just not a desirable situation. There's certain things you could do, like we'll get them later and catch them in a different time, a different place, different atmosphere. It's kind of a hard thing for law enforcement, though, because when law enforcement's called, we are there to solve the problem, right? And we always look for those solutions, and usually the easiest solution is to just settle this right now.
Right.
And big cities are dealing with stuff different than what we have. Like, there's not a lot of places to hide in Fond du Lac. We're eventually probably going to find you at some point. You know, people talk and this and that. So they are dealing with a little bit different of a situation, but it's just kind of interesting. But we do, as someone that teaches use of force stuff, we talk about that desirability a lot now, and whether we want to even put ourselves at risk in certain situations. One where that comes in hand is suicidal subjects. The courts have found that it sounds kind of harsh, but we're not legally responsible to save someone from taking their own life. Because what would happen is someone would be suicidal, maybe the police officers would storm the house trying to save that person's life and then end up taking their life. And so what's the sense of that? So we have kind of found different ways to get around that, to use different means so we're not putting ourselves in those situations when involved with suicidal subjects.
And I mean, it's also something, and like you said, it kind of sounds bad, but it could also turn into like a murder-suicide or something along those terms.
Exactly, and it has. There's been like documented cases of, you know, where they haven't even shot the suspect, they shot somebody else or whatever. So entering on those terms is just bad. And the courts already told us that we shouldn't have to enter on those terms if it's just that person that's a harm to themselves. But
Gotcha.
That could be a whole other show. That's a good idea. Maybe we'll bring that up for some other time.
So we got a topic maybe in the barrel for next week.
Yeah, definitely. Another question was posed is, you know, what kind of changes and stuff are going to happen at the Fond du Lac Police Department kind of after that? And now it's kind of weird because I can say what changes have been. And I don't want to sound egotistical or whatever, but as far as policy or anything like that was concerned, none. No changes had to be made because we were already following the guidelines that they came out with after this situation. We are an accredited agency, which a lot of people are like, oh, that's a big fancy term. But basically it means that we have to be compliant with the best policies that are used across the nation. And an accredited agency comes in and makes sure like that we're following all these different things. And we have to provide samples and stuff that show that we're accredited. Part of that came with us using the best practices for all policy and procedure. And by doing that, we were already in the right for as far as duty to intercede, which a lot of people, that was kind of a big George Floyd thing too. There was like 2 officers that were watching the whole thing do and did nothing. There's a couple other officers that were kind of using force like lower on Mr. Floyd, but like, you know, where does the Fond du Lac Police Department stand on that? And it's been in our policy forever that if we see any force that is unreasonable in our eyes, that we have to step in. And at the minimalist, at the lowest level, at least advise our supervisor. But if it's something egregious, then we definitely have to step in right then and at that moment. So that's ingrained on us when we do use of force training at least once a year, but actually more than that, actually at least twice a year. And we ingrain this duty to intercede. And now that has just changed a little bit too, as far as the state of Wisconsin. So it talks about what we're doing in the off-duty. So there's actually some new statutes that we're going to be training our officers on that we are responsible for. Let's say we go to the gas station and there's a police incident there and they're wrestling someone and we see too much force being used, that we would have to report that as well. And there's a duty to either stop it or report it, depending on what situation you're in. You know, if you're holding like 2 kids in your hand or something like that, there's a reasonableness to it. But it's just kind of interesting.
Okay, I want to ask you a kind of a follow-up question there about the accredited agency thing. Is this all police departments are accredited agencies, or is it like you have to do something above and beyond to become one? Like, how does that work?
That's a good question. You have to do something above and beyond. So it's not all police agencies. And that's kind of where these laws kind of come in, is that they're trying to probably get all the other agencies on board with those that haven't strived for this accreditation. We basically have an officer that's dedicated to this accreditation process. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of paperwork and stuff to make sure you're doing it and doing it right. And it's an achievement. So like it's something to be proud of if you achieve it because of the amount of work that goes into it, and it also shows that you're performing at the highest levels.
Awesome. That's great to hear. You're listening to Behind the Badge on News Talk 1450 KFIZ as Lieutenant Williams is in the studio.
Yeah, kind of going through the list of, I got questions about the George Floyd incident and things that our department has done, or what would we do if there was a similar matter. So let's say there was, and I wouldn't think that it's going to happen in Fond du Lac because of our training and the amount of stress. And I in charge, as being someone in charge of training, I constantly, actually every week, I send out videos of police using force, some good, some bad, just to make sure that we're all on the same level as far as what's appropriate and what's not. And I think we do a very good job. But as I said, no use of force looks pretty, ever. Doesn't matter what you do. It's not going to look pretty. Our goal is to get the person in handcuffs as fast as possible, which we find kind of minimizes the injury, where sometimes if you don't use enough force right away, you actually end up hurting that person because the struggle goes on longer and longer. So instead of like using the amount of force you're authorized to at the maximum effort and get them in handcuffs quick, you're fighting with them for a half hour, and then all of a sudden they have that adrenaline dump, and you could end up with an in-custody death or something like that. So the other thing we do is we have a really good fire department / EMS in this city. In fact, their response time is amazing. We work very good hand in hand on them. There might be some ribbing back and forth between us, but they get there quick. And if there's any question of any injury or anything like that, we are calling them, and they're going to roll out. And even if the person refuses, and we think that it justifies them coming to look at it, we're going to have them look at the injury and make sure. And a second chuck valve is if they go to jail too, they're going to get reassessed at jail, and then sometimes at jail they'll have us go to the hospital and medically clear them before they take them into the jail institute. So there's a lot into this of what we do, but we train our officers. We try to keep them at that professional standard. There's checks and balances. They have a duty to report if they see any kind of thing that goes on like this, and it's a constant build the right officers. And as someone that's kind of in charge of hiring new officers, I always look at two factors, and that's competence and character. Like, I can turn anybody into a police officer as long as, for one, they're a good person. They got to have that good character and make the right decisions. And you got to be a competent person. Not only do you have to have that character, make the right decisions, but you got to make sure they're the most well-informed decisions so that they are the right decisions. So a lot of things we do, I could go on forever, but we're already getting close to our time here. So, it's just kind of interesting. I want to get this out to the public to let them know that a lot of people have questions like this, and it's kind of easy to just listen to the news people that are just looking for a story instead of looking at what the facts are as far as what is already in place. And a lot of the stuff that's been implemented was already in place in Fond du Lac Police Department.
That is great to hear. Lieutenant Williams with Behind the Badge. Before I let you get out of here, I know you mentioned that you kind of go over some of the videos of other instances with your team as a training method of, okay, was the proper force used in this video? Could they have done more? Should they have done more? Or maybe that was way too much, something like that. Have you ever thought of doing maybe a YouTube series or something like that where you share your thoughts or something like that?
That would be awesome. The only thing I'm lacking now is time to do
Gotcha.
that. But I would love to do that because I already have all the videos because I save them all. And there was actually just a YouTube video, speaking of that, of an officer override where it was an officer saw another officer who was a sergeant using too much force, and she stepped in, and then that officer choked her. So he, I believe, is going to be without a job. I don't think that's ruling's done now, but it was kind of interesting to see that the tables are swinging the other way, where the officers, even a superior officer, are stepping up and making sure that they're not using too much force.
Lieutenant Williams, we appreciate the time and the information this morning. We'll chat next week.
Thank you.
You're listening to News Talk 1450 KFIZ.